Thank you, everyone, for being here. As Tara said, we're a host committee, and I'd like the members of the host committee to stand up so they can be recognized. These are the people who paid for your lunch, so welcome them. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Ambassador Lewis Lucke. Lewis is a member of Good Shepherd Episcopal Church here in Austin. He was ambassador to Swaziland. He has been for 27 years with the U.S. Agency for International Development. I'm sure he'll tell you some about his experiences there. He was the first USAID mission director for Iraq, where he managed a $4 billion reconstruction project, the largest economic development program since the Marshall Plan. More recently, he also served as U.S. response coordinator in Haiti after their earthquake, a $1 billion relief program. Ambassador Lucke has received the USAID's two highest service awards, the Administrator's Distinguished Career Award in 2001 and the agency's award for heroism in 2004. So it's with great, please help me welcome Lewis Lucke.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be here with you. I know an uncomfortably large number of people in this room, and so I have to be on my best behavior. It's really nice to see all my old friends here, and I really appreciate the invitation from the seminary. Some other old friends, almost family. Well, I want to start this presentation and end it kind of on the same note. One is this little pin that I'm wearing that you may have seen when you came in. That is an Arabic script, the letter N in Arabic. It stands for, in Arabic, the word is Nusara, which means Nazarene, which is the symbol that ISIS is painting on the houses of the Christians, the ancient Christian communities, descendants of first century Christians who have lived until ISIS came in and around Mosul, the second largest city in Iraq, and some of the Christian villages there. That symbol was to identify them for slaughter, to identify them, irrespective of their age, little kids, old folks, everybody else, if they did not convert to Islam or flee. And everyone that I have heard about, there may have been a few converts, but not very many, if any, they fled. They fled for the most part, they fled next door to Kurdistan, which is the semi-autonomous area of northern Iraq. The capital city is Erbil, where I used to live and work. So I'm very familiar with kind of where they went. But I was also face-to-face with 6,000 of these good people. Last year when I was living and working in Amman, Jordan. I used to be the head of USAID in Jordan in the 90s, from 96 to 2000. My family lived there. It was a wonderful professional and personal experience. We loved Jordan. Kind people, good place. Very much suffering from the instability in the region right now. Not as bad as Syria, not as bad as Iraq, but very much under threat. Anyway, so it was. I was there working on the impact of the Syrian refugee crisis on Jordan. I wasn't working directly with the refugees, but I was working as a former USAID director and a former ambassador, working with the Jordanian government and with a number of Jordanian institutions, actors, NGOs, international organizations, to try to mitigate the effects on Jordan and Jordanian populations because of being overrun by over 1.3 million Syrian refugees. So really, right now in Jordan, like 1 out of 10 people who live in Jordan are Syrian refugees, and that's a pretty astounding statistic. And Jordan is not a rich country. They don't have oil and gas like a lot of folks, a lot of other countries in the region. It's the second water poorest country in the world. So your government and the taxpayers, which includes you and me, we were providing as much as we could in terms of support for Jordanian communities, Jordanian institutions from the point of view of water, education, health, municipal services, and so forth, in order to really to help to stabilize these communities in northern Jordan particularly, but also all throughout the country that received all of these Syrian refugees. Really a potential element of instability in the region, in a region that's already under great threat. And the last thing you want is one of our most steadfast allies in the region is to be further destabilized. And I really like Jordan. You may have seen some of the pictures of this horrific murder by ISIS of the Jordanian pilot, and the reaction of the Jordanians was sort of pure, as my oldest daughter said, Bedouin anger. If you know anything about the region, I mean, they took an affront, a terrible affront. Everybody in Jordan really rallied around King Abdullah, His Majesty, as you're supposed to say, and he is a truly a good leader. Does not have the panache of or the gravitas that his father, King Hussein, did in terms of politics. But he's been a great reformer, and he's a great man, and he's been a great friend of the United States. And we certainly have a responsibility, long established since the 50s, of supporting Jordan. And it was in that context that we have a lot of our assets over there, military, diplomatic, economic development, and so forth, and intelligence. So we're working hard on that. There is more going on than you think. Anyway, so I was asked. I'm an Episcopalian and not much of an evangelist. Okay, it's not my style to run to the front of the church and shout "I believe" and stuff. But I have been asked to say a little bit about how I came to choose this particular profession, and it sort of happened. I think starting frankly with back in my little town, and I'm originally from North Carolina, but like the bumper sticker said, I wasn't born in Austin, but I got here as quickly as I could. And I hope that after being a citizen of like 45 years now, or 40 years, that I count as a real live Austinite, certainly feel at home and a proud Texan. But I tell you, it all got started really, frankly, due to going to church as a child, and I went to church a lot. And I'm from the South, and we took it sort of seriously. And as a child, I was fascinated by the Bible stories and fascinated by the places and all of the miracles and the inspiration and so forth. And I was a weird kid. I started reading things like the third or fourth grade about ancient Egypt and archaeology in the Middle East and so forth. And lo and behold, I guess when I was about 17 years old, sort of a very esteemed and renowned biblical scholar and archaeologist came to speak at my church. He was an ordained minister, and he spoke, and for some reason, I can't remember why, they asked me to introduce him, and I did. And after he made his presentation, I went up to this distinguished gentleman, Dr. Boyd, who was a religion professor at the place where I went to college, ultimately. I asked him a few questions that he said, you're basically was saying, how come you know about this stuff? You're kind of a strange kid. And then he said, why don't you come with me next summer for our dig? We're going to be excavating one of the Solomon's chariot cities that's mentioned in Ezekiel, called Lachish, which was a very, very interesting thing. We found like one of only the second Israelite altar that had ever been found. The first one had been actually found at a place called Arad a couple of years before. Anyway, so long story short was I went, and it really transformed my life. I realized that the earth didn't rotate around my little town in North Carolina. My eyes were open to the world. I was fascinated with Israel, We lived on a kibbutz, for example. It was a real eye-opening experience. But I was also really fascinated after the dig was over. I spent a lot of time in East Jerusalem, the present-day West Bank. And this was the year after the Six-Day War. It was the first time that, Israel had complete control of Jerusalem. I remember there being kind of very few people out because it was still an unstable situation. But it made an incredible difference in my life in that I suddenly realized firsthand that these places that we talked about in the Bible and the experiences that we talked about in the Bible, this was not Hollywood. This was not made up. This was real stuff. And it really made an impression on me, and it really changed me. And it made me want to, number one, not waste a second of my precious life that the good Lord gave me. Number two, I wanted to try to, at the end of the day, at the end of my days on earth, I wanted to be able to turn around and say, I tried really hard to make this a slightly better place. It may not be much, it may not be, significant, but I'm going to try the best I can to give something back for the grace of being born comfortable in this great country. Number one, and number two, as a human being walking on the planet in troubled times and in troubled areas of the world, I was happy to live in these developing countries and drag my wife from West Austin to West Africa. that was try to explain that to my father-in-law and mother-in-law, and she said we were moving to Bamako in West Africa, in Mali, in West Africa, which is where Timbuktu was my first country. And my mother-in-law says, "Well, how big is Bamako?" I said, "Well, it's about 700,000 people." And she said, "Well," turned to Joy, my wife, and said, "You're going to need a new pair of heels." And I didn't quite understand that, and I still don't. I said maybe a new pair of flip-flops would be kind of really more like it. But anyway, so we trounced off to Timbuktu, and I've been to Timbuktu 2 or 3 times. And I said to my wife, I said, "Look, we have a plane that's going to Timbuktu. Would you like to come? You might your only chance to see Timbuktu, and you can really say that you've been there, because very few people can say they've been there." She said, "No, that's okay. I'm going to just stay home with the kid, and if I need to tell anybody I went to Timbuktu, I'll just lie and just say I went there." Anyway, what do you say to that? Anyway, so I went to Timbuktu by myself or with my colleagues. Anyway, I felt so I've lived USAID, in case you don't know, is U.S. Agency for International Development. And that's the part of it's been more or less gobbled up by the State Department, for better or for worse. But they're the part of the State Department that does economic development programs all over the world, as well as humanitarian assistance programs. So I was the director of AID in 5 different countries, including, as John said, the first one in Iraq. Did the Haiti, led the U.S. response to the Haiti earthquake, was the head of USAID in Iraq, Haiti, Jordan, Bolivia, and Brazil. And so that means I'm geographically confused and may never get over it. But in any event, it's been a fun and really, really interesting and very rewarding career. And being in Jordan, I think, was the most rewarding time for me, because we were there when King Hussein passed away, and there was a transition to his son, and there was a great worries about instability in the region. So the United States did a lot of really significant work behind the scenes. You'll never hear about it. You'll never know the first thing about it, because it's good news, and you tend to not hear anything about good news, just like you don't ever hear about the probably 50,000 successes we had in Iraq in terms of getting Iraq's essential infrastructure back up on its feet and running, power, water, wastewater treatment, you name it. We did that. You've never heard a word about it probably, and you probably never will, but we're very, very proud of what we were able to accomplish. So I'm now in the vaunted private sector, 3 companies of my own, and I'm having a great time because I'm my own boss. But I have these wonderful partners that understand that every once in a while the State Department is going to call me and try to recall me to go back and do some official work. So I did that in Jordan last year from September through November, and I started to hear, I went to the refugee camps where the Syrians are, but most of the refugees from Syria are not in the refugee camps. They're in the cities. They're 80% of them are in Amman and surrounding cities for the most part. So it's a real, as I started off to say, it's a real element of economic instability in the country to have all of these refugees suddenly show up and need to be schooled and drink water and all of that. They're not supposed to work. It's a real problem. So I was working there, but I heard, because ISIS, the whole ISIS thing was going on starting really full blast. Mosul had been conquered by ISIS. ISIS was running through the countryside. It looked like they were even going to be able to invade Kurdistan and possibly even take over Erbil, where so many of the refugees had fled to and taken refuge. Fortunately, the Peshmerga, the Kurdish forces, were able to repel them. The U.S. started to provide more in terms of arms and support for the Pesh, or for the Kurds, and ISIS was deterred. But at the same time, the Christian refugees were taking it really on the chin. I mean, they fled, given the choice of convert or die or flee. As I said, they fled. Most of them went to Erbil, where there are now probably over 150,000 of these folks, mostly scattered in the one little Christian enclave of Erbil, which is called Ankawa, which is you're there because you start seeing beer signs and churches. So anyway, that's because the Christians are the only ones that are allowed to sell alcohol in the Middle East. So I mean, when you're in the Christian quarter. But there's also a big presence at churches, and it's very nice on Sunday. The bells are ringing, and rather than hear the mosque going off like you normally hear. So it was also made clear to me that there were a number of these Iraqi Christian refugees that were living in my town, in Amman, Jordan, the capital of Jordan. There were 4,000 when I first started visiting these folks. And I have lots and lots of pictures of them, which are very compelling. Unfortunately, we were not set up to show these pictures today, but we will. I've been promised that we'll send some of the pictures to you via email, because I think the seminary has some of your contact information. So if you're interested, we'll get that to you. But these people, it's really important, and I wish I could convey to you that these people have lost everything for faith. They have suffered for faith. They have, in many cases, died for faith. They see themselves as the key continuation of a Christian presence in northern Iraq, and one of the places in the Middle East that is the most ancient Christian communities. They're very proud of that. These are good people. They're the descendants of the Assyrians. Where they live is called the Assyrian Plain. They consider themselves the original Iraqis. They're educated, distinguished, kind people, engineers, doctors, teachers, everything in between. And they, when they fled, ISIS put roadblocks all around the Christian villages. The main one is a place called Karakola, and then around Mosul, as they tried to flee to Erbil and cross into Kurdistan. And they took everything from them. They took their jewelry, the money, if they had any. Most of them, they took their any kind of baggage that they had. So these people had absolutely nothing. The lucky ones made it out and were eventually were able to make it to Jordan. And when I was there, I started visiting these refugees. Actually, I saw a story about it on CNN, and there was a little article in the New York Times about these folks that were taking refuge in the churches of the Christian community in Amman, Jordan. And there were 4,000, but I found out later that there were actually more like 6,000, because 2,000 more were on the way, and they're still arriving today. When the people are able to have the means to be able to travel to Amman. So when I lived in Amman, in Jordan before, we used to say that there were 6% of the population was Christian. By the time I was back there last year, the official number is 2%. So this is happening all over the Middle East. It can be from Egypt with the Copts, from the Maronite Christians in Lebanon, which used to be a majority, that are now anything but, over 2 million or 3 million Christians in Iraq, probably down to 500,000 right now. Christians in the Middle East, in addition to being persecuted communities, have tended to be better educated and have a little more in terms of economic means, and they've been able to basically flee when it came down to it, and a lot of them unfortunately had to do it. The thing that was so frustrating or just appalling for these good Christian people from around Mosul was that they were turned into ISIS by their Muslim neighbors. And they said, we've lived beside these people for generations and generations and generations. Yet when push came to shove, they pointed us out as infidels to ISIS. And the most, I think, poignant picture that I had that you're not going to see, at least this time, is a picture of one of the villas of one of the Christian families in Mosul with this N right here, painted on it to identify them for slaughter if they did not flee or convert. Okay, so what I want to try to convey is that, I wish I could, open your heart and open your mind and whatever, and somehow, and grab some of our so-called cable channels or international news channels by the throat and say, you've got to cover this stuff. I mean, this is happening right in front of our eyes, and you don't know, and you probably have heard only a little bit about it from time to time. This is there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world right now, and ISIS, frankly, in my opinion, we've known about for a while, and we did not have to let this happen. Now, as a government, we've done some things that were not too intelligent, as far as I'm concerned, that have allowed a vacuum to develop in Iraq. And when there's a vacuum, something, laws of physics, something's going to fill it. And this time it was filled by ISIS. I'm terribly concerned, not only about the well-being of these good people, and I really want to try to paint as vivid a picture as I can to you without the benefit of my pictures, so that you know that these people are suffering. They're good folks. They love their children. They value their religion. They will never convert. They have been in Amman. They've been taken into 14 different Christian churches. And the Christian community is, as I said, 2% of the population in Jordan. It's small. But the main denominations that have accepted these folks are Greek Orthodox, but also Catholic and also Syriac. There's been a number of, some of the Protestant denominations, including Episcopal, called Anglican there, have been very active in trying to support these people, but they need all the help they can get. The UN agency called UNHCR, High Commission for Refugees, is in charge of registering these folks and trying to get them on a list and make sure that they don't fall through the cracks and be forgotten. But at the same time, they need all the help they can get. I've been trying to raise money with some old friends in North Carolina, other folks here that have networks. Good Shepherd has been fantastic. Lisa Rodman has been very helpful, and we're at this point we've raised a decent amount of money. I mean, north of $50,000, and we're sending it to two NGOs that are registered and completely reputable there. One is Caritas Jordan, and the other is a NGO that's run by a priest who is a miracle man in Amman named Father Jar, and his NGO is called Messengers of Peace. Anyway, they're truly saintly people in this world, and there are truly miracles that are going on all the time. And I can tell you that our Lord and Savior has not abandoned the region at all. And I want to read you something that I just received. Coincidentally, I just got this email last night from a friend of mine who's from Austin that I had briefed before she went to the Middle East, to Jordan, Kurdistan, and Lebanon. Said, "Greetings, Lewis. I've just returned from Jordan, Lebanon, and northern Iraq, and it was a fantastic trip. I've traveled like you. I've traveled all around the world. However, I'm compelled to action by all that I saw and experienced in this trip in a fresh way. I will continue to be involved. Thank you for your helping to set the stage for a life-altering trip. This is an unprecedented time in the Middle East, as one leader told us. These are horrible and great days. A wide door of effective service and opportunity is open to his followers globally. As we traveled, we heard stories of unimaginable terror and testimonies of his intervention, power, and love. There has been a total upheaval in social and religious structures as ISIS has advanced, and in the chaos, many are responding to Jesus. One put it this way: Islam has not given us anything for 1,000 years, and you have come and showed us love. We don't understand. Please continue to pray for our team as we put together presentations and invitation for actions for those who have sent us. I pray that the stories, needs, and opportunities we share will be a catalyst for the involvement in the lives of the victims of war and to stop and slow the advance of ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Our days in Jordan were eye-opening. Over 10% of the population is now comprised of Syrian refugees, and the majority of them do not live in the UN camps. We were able to spend time with several Syrian families in their homes and share stories of Jesus with them. They told us stories of fighting and war that encroached upon their towns and the difficult decisions they made to leave and make their way to Jordan. One mom told me how her young daughter didn't speak for days after hearing explosion after explosion, seeing body parts in the street, and having to make her way with her family to another country. The men expressed their desire to work again, and one said, "Work is good for the sons of Adam. Being here, our brains are squashed." All requested prayer that they would be able to return to Syria, and all were eager to hear stories of Jesus. We also visited some Syrian refugees in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, where a friend is organizing informal tent schools taught by fellow refugees. We heard many stories of Jesus showing up in dreams, answering prayers, restoring families, and bringing forgiveness and hope in circumstances that are almost beyond comprehension. Victims who have lost loved ones are now praying for their extremist torturers. One worker who has lived and worked in the region for 22 years told us, "We've never seen a move of God like this in this part of the world. It is not uncommon for churches to be filled with Muslims." Kurdistan was our final destination. We met with families and individuals and heard many different stories. Many of the young girls are pregnant due to rape and will give birth soon. Some of their families want to kill the children. Some of the girls want to abort them. One teenager, a friend of those who stayed, took her own life the night before we arrived as her boyfriend had been kidnapped and most likely killed by insurgents. The psychological and cultural ramifications of all that continues to happen and are significant. Please pray for these young girls. Our last night in Dahuk, we had dinner. Dahuk is a northern city in the northern part of Kurdistan. We had dinner with a local leader and his family that had been there when I was there in the 90s. And we shared stories these days, and we talked about what had happened since. He shared stories of God at work and urged us to communicate that now is the time for the church to respond as they need it, as they need all the help. It was powerful. Thank you again for your prayers and words of encouragement. It was a tremendous privilege to go. Jesus is at work in ways that you will never hear about through the media. Please be encouraged that your prayers for this part of the world are invaluable. As one man told us, we live by your prayers. So that was really a timely email. I don't necessarily believe in coincidences, and I think it was good that I was able to share a little bit of that story. It's very much parallels my own experience. So I want to leave time for questions, but I hope that I've been able to convey, at least in a small sense, what these good people, our brothers and sisters, are going through in the Middle East. They're dear people, and they're suffering for their faith. We need to be aware of it. We need to know what they're going through. We need to know, if you're interested in helping, we can certainly help. We can certainly help you help. That's for sure. Just please talk to me about that. I don't want to. It's no hard sell at all on contributions, but this is part of an overall effort that a lot of churches, good groups that are aware of the problem. We're trying the best to help. So let me stop right there, except to say I'm not much for like I said, I'm a pretty terrible evangelist, and because I'm Episcopalian, I don't know, maybe that kind of maybe that kind of goes with the territory. But there's one Bible verse I will share with you that I kind of like, which is from Philippians 2. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. So that's kind of one of my favorite ones right there. So let me see if you find folks have any questions. It would be my privilege and honor to try to respond to any of them. Well, we're speaking about here about two groups of refugees that aren't exactly probably in the same boat. The vast number of these are the 1.3 million Syrian refugees that are mostly Muslims that are taking refuge in Jordan. There's a similar number in Turkey, another similar number in Lebanon. These people want to go home. They want to go back to Syria. And if even though I think Syria pretty much as the old Syria that was established at the end of World War I is pretty much gone. Whether they'll be able to go home or not, I don't know. Particularly the Christian community in Syria, which is another ancient Christian community, their ability to go home is very much in doubt because of the continued problems with as we call it, the regime, the Assad regime, parts of Syria that go back and forth between different rebel factions and so forth, and unfortunately the growth of ISIS's conquest. Just last week, ISIS took over Palmyra, which is an amazing, World Heritage ruins, from the Roman days, and afterwards, which is, astounding, and they're doing the terrible thing that they're doing there. So, anyway, it's very doubtful that all these people can come home, but many of them will come home. Now, the Iraqi Christians that are in Kurdistan that are in Jordan, that's what you say is right, Lisa. It's very unlikely these people are going to ever be able to go home again. One is because they're few in numbers. ISIS is still in control, and we haven't come up with a strategy to effectively counter that. And these people are crushed by the fact that they were turned in by their Arab or Muslim neighbors. So many of these folks, having a little bit more in the terms of means and international savvy, some of them really they want to leave. I mean, they're going to have to leave, and many of them have ties to communities in the States or in Canada or in Europe. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that these people would make great Americans or Canadians or wherever they end up. I mean, these are fine folks, but that's sort of the difference. Anything else? Yes, ma'am. Well, I hope so. The problem is you don't hear much of anything about this because it's just not covered, and I think that's just a crime. Frankly, you don't hear about it on CNN or Fox or whatever the other cable news, and I don't watch the CBS and all that stuff. I don't even watch it. I don't even bother because I find it to be basically worthless. I mean, I listen frankly to BBC International and some of this other stuff, and what little bit you get. I think the answer is that it depends. I mean, the process when you're a refugee, you have to be, and you're outside refugee, meaning you're not an IDP. An IDP is an internal refugee. These are external refugees outside their country. They're real live refugees. They have to register with UNHCR, the UN High Commission for Refugees, and then they are processed. And Lord knows what that means. But it's a long-term process. It'll take from the time they register to the time that it's ultimately decided where they will go and if they will go and how they will go. It could be 3 or 4 years. So these people are in the meantime are, they're stranded. They're between a rock and a hard place. They can't work. They've got kids growing up. They've got all the needs for medicine and rent and school tuition and so forth. So that's what we're trying to do is try to ease ease their path until their future is clear and established. We're trying to do what we can to try to help them make it a little bit easier. Yes, sir. Yeah, the short answer is sure. I mean, I personally think there's nothing been quite this evil to manifest itself in a long, long time. And this version of Islam, or whatever they call it, is particularly virulent and particularly violent and particularly just inhumanly atrocious. So, I think a reasonable person would say, something like this, if it's really only 40 or 50,000 ISIS fighters, even though they're riding around in our Humvees and with the rest of our weapons, you sort of say, it's just not possible that these folks could continue to last, and they have to go away. But the question is, how do they go away? And people would have already predicting their demise, months ago, are now seeing them seize new territory. They seized Ramadi, that a lot of our guys and probably ladies lost their lives back in a few years ago, and to see all of that disappear is just terrible. And I tell you, somebody that was in charge of USAID for the first year, with as I said, 40,000 or 50,000 accomplishments. I mean, it's really disheartening for us to see that hard work, effort, money, and so forth, mostly achieved by Iraqis, see that disappear. But to more directly answer your question, I think there are several possibilities of a force that would be counter to that. One would be, and probably the most preferable, would be a force of the Sunni nations that are inclined to take on ISIS, not Iran, because Iran is not a Sunni nation, it's a Shia nation, and Iran is anathema to most of those countries in the region, with the exception of maybe the Yemeni folks now, and unfortunately the ruling Shia majority in Iraq. So countries like, in other words, countries like Jordan, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Turkey, and so forth, would be, and Saudi Arabia. They would be the obvious ones to form a confederation and to take these guys on. We need to be, in my humble opinion, you ask, I mean, we need to be more involved. We don't have to send vast numbers of troops, but we can send forward air observers. We can deploy special operations troops. We can do quick strike special operations like we did a couple of weeks ago in Syria, and we can embed some of our good special ops people as advisors to the Iraqi military. So I think all of those are possibilities. But I mean, I think inevitably ISIS is going to go away, but it's not going to go away because we want it to go away and because we ignore it. Sir. Yes, sir. Well, I think we finally seem to have rectified that a little bit. We are sending stuff directly to the Kurds now. Is it enough? Is it the right stuff? I don't really know. I'm not on the inside of it right now to be able to say. But as you point out, I mean, the sensitivity there is that even though Kurdistan is a semi-autonomous region of Iraq, it has its own cabinet, it has its own flag, it has its own army, the Peshmerga. But we the U.S. we want to continue the perception and the reality that Iraq is one country, and therefore we need to not ignore the federal government of Iraq. So I'm not saying I agree with that, because in addition to sort of, I would say, weak American leadership over the last few years that we've had, there's also been leadership in Iraq by al-Maliki that was very, very damaging to the ability of all the various factions of Iraq to work together productively and therefore to counter ISIS effectively. Yes, sir. Yeah. No. A lot of there's the same long-term presence of Christians, Christian Kurds, as well as Christian Assyrians or Christian Chaldeans in Iraq, and have been for centuries and centuries. I've visited churches from the 3rd century A.D. in Kurdistan. So there's a long history of Christian presence. In fact, there was a substantial number of Jewish folks in Kurdistan until the late 40s, when they were all evacuated to Israel and flown to Israel. You may not know this, but the population of Baghdad up until the late 40s used to be 1/4 Jewish. Okay, and these weren't folks that showed up from Brooklyn. These were folks that were left over from the conquest of the first temple by Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, and they were the descendants anyway. So it's a long and complex story, but the Kurds are, for the most part, are Sunni Muslims, and they are tolerant Sunni Muslims, and they get along with pretty much everybody. And I mean, you talk about a place that's pro-American. It was hard for me to buy a meal. It was hard for me to pay a taxi because I would get in the car and I'd start speaking Arabic to them because I don't speak Kurdish. So I'd speak Arabic to them, and they turn around and say, "Where are you from?" I was like, "Texas." And then they say, "Well, it's free. I mean, you're not paying for anything." I mean, they're very grateful. We saved them. In fact, my old boss in Iraq was the head of Operation Provide Comfort in 1991, when we basically stopped Saddam's genocide against the Kurds, and they're forever grateful for our assistance. Anyway, so let me thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I just wanted to. I hope this has been a little bit enlightening, or not, but let me know if I can provide you any more information. We welcome your care and your prayers for these oppressed Christian communities that are truly our brothers and sisters, and really don't ask for anything but need everything. And at that, thank you.